I did everything for my family, but when my husband died, my son said, "Don't expect a dime from Dad's fortune." The words hit me like a slap across the face. Don't expect a dime from Dad's money. My own son, Robert, standing in the hallway of the home I'd built with William over 50 years, speaking as if I wasn't even there. I stood frozen at the top of the staircase, my hand gripping the wooden banister that William had lovingly restored during our 10th anniversary. "She's still breathing?" Thought she'd be gone by now. Robert's voice drifted up, mingling with the hushed laughter of his wife, Patricia. It had been exactly 4 days since we laid William to rest. 4 days since I watched them lower my husband's casket into the ground. 4 days of tears that no one saw, because I'd learned long ago to cry silently. And here they were, already dividing up what remained of our life together. I took a deep breath and descended the stairs, my black dress still smelling of funeral roses. The house was filled with voices, not of mourning, but of anticipation. They hadn't even waited for the flowers on William's grave to wilt before gathering at our home to claim their prizes. As I reached the bottom step, my granddaughter Emma brushed past me, her phone held high as she took photos of the living room. "This wall needs to come down," she announced to no one in particular. "Open concept is totally in right now." I glanced around at what used to be my sanctuary. Neon sticky notes had appeared everywhere, like garish butterflies landing on my life's memories. The grandfather clock that had marked every important moment of our marriage bore a bright green sticker with Michael's name scrawled across it. The china cabinet where I'd lovingly displayed our wedding dishes now wore a yellow tag. The leather armchair where William used to read to our son when he was little, claimed with a blue marker. They were dividing up my skin while I was still breathing inside it. "Mother," Patricia said, suddenly noticing me. She wore a black dress that seemed more appropriate for a cocktail party than a period of mourning. "We didn't hear you coming down." "Clearly," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Robert appeared from the kitchen, holding a glass of William's favorite scotch. "Mom, we're just getting organized. Dad's lawyer said the will reading is in 2 weeks, but there's no reason we can't start planning ahead." Planning ahead. As if my home was already no longer mine. As if I was just an inconvenience to be dealt with before they could truly celebrate their windfall. "Would you like some tea?" Patricia asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I've put the kettle on." Before I could answer, Michael, my teenage grandson, bumped into the side table, knocking over a framed photo of William and me on our 40th anniversary. He picked it up, glanced at it, and casually placed it face down on the shelf. "This place is so outdated," he muttered. "Seriously, Grandma? When was the last time you redecorated?" The night. I bit my tongue. This was the boy I had cared for when he had chicken pox. The one I'd taught to bake chocolate chip cookies. The one who once called me his favorite person in the whole universe. Now he looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, an obstacle. Emma returned to the living room, still focused on her phone. "Mom, I've measured the master bedroom. Once we move Grandma to the guest room, we can start renovations right away." "I'm not moving anywhere," I said quietly. The room fell silent. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me, expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance. "Mom," Robert began, his tone one might use with a confused child. "We've discussed this. The house is too big for you to maintain alone. You'll be much more comfortable in the guest room until we figure out more permanent arrangements." Permanent arrangements. The words hung in the air like a threat. I knew what they meant. A retirement home. A facility. Somewhere out of sight. Out of mind. Where I wouldn't interfere with their plans for William's money. "We haven't discussed anything," I replied. "William has been gone for 4 days. 4 days." My voice cracked slightly. "And you're already rearranging furniture and planning renovations?" Patricia stepped forward, her face a mask of concern that didn't match the calculation in her eyes. "Martha, we're just trying to help. You're in your 70s. This house has too many stairs, too many rooms to clean. We're thinking of your well-being." "My well-being?" I repeated, looking around at the sticky notes, at the faces of people who seemed more like strangers than family. Is that why you're drinking William's scotch and claiming his possessions before he's even cold in his grave? Robert's face hardened. Dad would want us to be practical. There's no sense in getting emotional about objects. Objects. The word stung. The grandfather clock wasn't just an object. It was where William and I had stood together at midnight every New Year's Eve, stealing a kiss as it chimed 12 times. The china cabinet wasn't just furniture. It held the dishes we'd saved for and bought piece by piece in our lean early years. Every item in this house had a story, a memory, a piece of our shared life. And they were reducing it all to dollar signs. I walked slowly to the living room window, looking out at the garden William and I had planted together. The roses were starting to bloom, deep crimson against the green leaves. He wouldn't see them this year. The will reading is in 2 weeks, I said finally, not turning around. Nothing changes until then. I could feel their frustration like a tangible force in the room. I didn't care. Let them wait. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been preparing for this moment for years, because while they saw me as just William's wife, the woman who made soup and knitted sweaters, I had always been so much more. And soon, very soon, they would learn exactly what they had overlooked all these years. But first, I needed to endure their dismissal, their disrespect, and their greed. I needed to watch them carefully, to remember every slight, every insulting comment, every moment they treated me like I was already a ghost. Because ghosts, as it turns out, can come back to haunt you. And I had a feeling that my family was about to experience a haunting like no other. That night, I sat alone in the bedroom I had shared with William for 50 years, listening to the sounds of my family moving through the house below. Laughter drifted up through the floorboards, the clink of glasses, the casual way they were celebrating while I sat in solitude with my grief. I opened the drawer of my bedside table and pulled out an old leather journal, its pages yellowed with time. Inside were memories, dates, notes, and more importantly, evidence of a life they never bothered to learn about. What would they say if they knew that the woman they were so quick to dismiss had once been the backbone of everything they now coveted? I turned the fragile pages, a small smile playing on my lips, despite my sadness. Soon, they would know. Soon they would understand exactly who I was, and who I had always been. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of furniture being moved. For a moment, I thought it was William, rearranging the living room as he often did when inspiration struck. Then reality crashed down, he was gone, and the noise was my family, already making changes to my home. I dressed slowly, deliberately choosing a crisp blue blouse that William had always complimented, pairing it with my pearl necklace. If they expected me to shrink into the background, they were mistaken. I may be grieving, but I was still here. When I descended the stairs, I found the living room transformed. The sofa had been pushed against a different wall, the coffee table was gone, and in its place stood several cardboard boxes labeled donations and storage. Patricia was directing the chaos, like a general commanding troops. That painting can go in the attic. No one wants that old-fashioned thing. The painting she referred to was one William and I had purchased on our 25th anniversary trip to Maine, a seascape that had always reminded us of our honeymoon. That painting stays where it is, I said firmly, stepping into the room. Patricia turned, clearly startled by my presence. Martha. Good morning. We're just doing a bit of decluttering. In my house, without my permission? I kept my voice level, though anger simmered beneath the surface. Mom. Robert appeared from the dining room, clipboard in hand. We're trying to help organize things. There's so much stuff accumulated over the years. Stuff? I repeated. Is that what you call the life your father and I built together? Emma rolled her eyes from the corner where she was sorting through photo albums. Grandma, no offense, but this place is like a museum. No one uses china cabinets anymore. It's all so ancient, like me, I supposed. I watched as Michael carelessly tossed a stack of William's books into a box, not even looking at the titles. One of them was a first edition Hemingway that I'd saved for months to buy William on our 15th anniversary. "Stop," I said, my voice sharper than intended. "You don't touch anything else in this house without asking me first." Robert exchanged a look with Patricia, the kind of look parents give each other when a child is having a tantrum. It made my blood boil. "Mom," he began in that patronizing tone I was growing to hate, "Dad left the house to all of us. It's family property now." "The will hasn't been read," I reminded him. "And until it is, this is still my home." Patricia sighed dramatically. "Martha, we're just trying to get a head start on organizing. The house will need to be sold eventually." "Sold?" The word felt like a knife. Who said anything about selling my home? Another exchange of glances between Robert and Patricia. Then my son stepped forward, placing his hands on my shoulders in what I'm sure he thought was a comforting gesture. "Mom, be reasonable. This house is far too big for you alone. The property taxes alone would eat up your savings in no time. We've been looking at some really nice retirement communities. There's one in Arizona that has a wonderful art program. You'd love it." Arizona. Across the country from the home I'd made, the garden I'd planted, the memories I'd built. Away from William's grave, which I had planned to visit every Sunday with fresh flowers. I stepped back, removing his hands from my shoulders. "I'm not going anywhere." "Don't be difficult," Robert said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Dad would want you to be practical. Don't tell me what your father would want," I replied, my voice dangerously quiet. "I was married to him for 50 years. You visited twice a year, if we were lucky." A flash of guilt crossed his face, quickly replaced by irritation. "That's not fair. We have our own lives, our own family." "And I'm not part of that family?" I asked. Emma huffed from her corner. "Grandma, seriously, you're being so dramatic. No one's kicking you out today. We're just planning for the future. A future where I was an afterthought, a burden to be managed. A future where the home William and I had built together would be dismantled, sold off, erased as if our life here had meant nothing." "The kitchen renovation estimate came in," Michael announced, walking in with a piece of paper. "Contractor can start next month." Patricia brightened. "That's perfect. I've always hated this old-fashioned kitchen. We're thinking subway tile backsplash, Martha. And maybe one of those farmhouse sinks that are so popular now." They were remodeling my kitchen, the heart of the home where I had prepared thousands of meals, taught Robert to bake cookies, celebrated countless birthdays and holidays. The kitchen where William would sneak up behind me while I was cooking, wrap his arms around my waist, and whisper that whatever I was making smelled almost as good as I did. Something inside me hardened. A resolve I hadn't felt in years settled into my bones. They thought I was just a grieving widow, easily pushed aside, easily managed. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" Robert looked genuinely confused. "Get out of my house. All of you. Now." Patricia laughed nervously. "Martha, you can't be serious. We're family." "Family doesn't treat each other this way," I replied. "Family respects boundaries. Family honors grief. You've done neither, so please, take your sticky notes and your renovation plans, and leave my home." Robert's face flushed with anger. "Mom, you're not thinking clearly. The grief is mine," I cut him off. "And you're not allowing me to experience it. You're too busy dividing up the spoils." "That's completely unfair," Patricia protested. "We're trying to help." "Help yourselves, you mean?" I retorted. "I've watched you place stickers on my possessions as if I'm already dead. I've heard you planning to sell my home from under me. That's not help, Patricia. That's greed." Emma stood up, her face a mask of teenage indignation. "Wow, Grandma. Just wow. We came all this way to support you, and this is how you thank us? Support me? By planning my exile? By treating my home like a department store during a clearance sale?" By dismissing my life with William as stuff and ancient relics? I need time to grieve, I said firmly. Alone. Please respect that and leave. For a moment, no one moved. Then Robert shook his head, the gesture so reminiscent of William that it made my heart ache. Fine, he said coldly. We'll go to a hotel. But this conversation isn't over, Mom. You can't live here alone. It's not practical, and it's not what Dad would want. He didn't know what William would want. None of them did. They hadn't been there during our quiet conversations, our plans, our promises to each other. They hadn't seen the documents we'd prepared, the arrangements we'd made. They knew nothing of the truth that would soon be revealed. I watched silently as they gathered their things, muttering about unreasonable and emotional and not thinking clearly. Patricia made a show of hugging me before they left, her embrace stiff and insincere. We'll check in tomorrow, she said. Once you've had time to think? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I might regret. As the front door closed behind them, the house fell into a blessed silence. I walked slowly through the rooms, removing every colored sticker, every claim they had tried to stake. The grandfather clock, the china cabinet, William's books. All of it returned to its rightful place. With me. In the kitchen, I found a bottle of William's favorite scotch on the counter, half empty. Robert's doing, no doubt. I poured myself a small glass, something I rarely did, and raised it in a silent toast to my husband. They have no idea what's coming, my love, I whispered to the empty room. No idea at all. I took a small sip, feeling the liquid warm my throat. Then I walked to the study, unlocked the bottom drawer of William's desk, and removed a sealed envelope. Inside was a key, not to the house, not to a safety deposit box, but to a truth they had never bothered to discover. The key to everything William and I had built together. The key to a legacy they thought belonged only to him. The key that would soon unlock their worst nightmare, a grandmother who refused to be erased. I met William Harrington in the spring of 1968. When the world was changing, and so was I. I wasn't Martha then. I was Marty, a bright-eyed accounting major at the University of Michigan, with dreams as big as the sky. My professors called me a natural with numbers. My fellow students asked me to tutor them. I graduated summa cum laude, one of only 8 women in a class of 97. The day I received my degree, my father pulled me aside, his expression serious beneath his proud smile. You'll go far, Marty, he said. Just remember, in a man's world, you'll need to be twice as good to be considered half as valuable. Don't let that stop you. I never intended to. I had job offers from 3 accounting firms before graduation, unheard of for a woman in those days. I accepted a position with Hammond and Associates in Chicago, packed my bags, and prepared to conquer the financial world. That's when I met William. He was the nephew of Mr. Hammond himself, working in the investment division while developing his own business on the side. Tall, with thoughtful eyes and a quiet confidence, he wasn't like the other men at the firm who either ignored me or treated me like a secretary. William noticed my work. He saw the corrections I made to balance sheets, the innovative tax strategies I developed, the way I could look at a company's financials and instantly identify both problems and potential. He started bringing me files from his fledgling business, asking for my opinion over coffee breaks. You have a mind for this, Marty, he told me once. You see patterns that others miss. We were married a year later. It wasn't the plan I'd had for myself, at least not so soon. But William was different. He valued my mind as much as my heart. Or so I thought. The trouble began when William's business started to grow. Harrington Investments was gaining clients, reputation, momentum. William needed a partner. Someone who understood financial markets and had a head for strategy. That should be me, I told him one night over dinner in our small apartment. We'd make an incredible team, William. His expression had shifted then, a shadow passing over his features. Marty, he said gently, clients expect a certain image. They want to entrust their money to someone who projects stability, tradition. And a woman doesn't project those qualities? I challenged. He reached for my hand across the table. It's not what I believe. It's the reality of the business world. Besides, he added, his voice softening, we're planning to start a family soon. You wouldn't want to divide your attention. It wasn't posed as a command or even a request. It was framed as the natural order of things, the obvious choice any woman would make. And part of me understood, the business world in 1970 wasn't kind to women, especially in finance. Perhaps William was protecting me from inevitable disappointment. So I made a choice. I left Hammond and Associates and became William's unofficial partner instead. At home, I reviewed client portfolios, developed investment strategies, identified emerging market opportunities, all behind the scenes. William would take my work to the office, present it as his own, and return with praise from clients and colleagues alike. Old man Jenkins said this analysis was the best he'd ever seen, he'd tell me, his eyes bright with excitement. He's moving his entire portfolio to our firm. I'd smile, feeling a mixture of pride and something else I couldn't quite name. I'm glad it helped. When Robert was born in 1972, I threw myself into motherhood with the same dedication I'd once given to my career. But at night, after I'd put our son to bed, I'd still spread financial statements across the kitchen table, still run numbers, still craft strategies that William would claim as his own the next day. It was our system, our secret partnership. William built the public face of Harrington Investments, charming, confident, the quintessential financial advisor, while I built the foundation, the substance, the actual strategies that made the firm successful. I told myself it didn't matter that my name wasn't on the letterhead. It didn't matter that clients never knew who really managed their money. What mattered was that we were building something together, William and I. A business, a family, a future. And for many years, that was enough. I watched from the sidelines as Harrington Investments grew from a small office with 3 employees to a respected firm with dozens of staff and hundreds of clients. I attended company Christmas parties as William's wife, smiling politely while men who didn't know I existed discussed investment strategies I had created. The irony wasn't lost on me. But I had made my choice, and I was determined to find fulfillment in it. After all, wasn't I fortunate? I had a successful husband who valued my input, privately, a beautiful son, a lovely home. So what if the world didn't know my capabilities? William did, and that should be enough. But something changed in 1987, when the market crashed and panic swept through the financial world. Clients were calling, demanding answers, threatening to pull their investments. William came home each night more stressed than the last, his confidence crumbling under the weight of responsibility. We could lose everything, Marty, he confessed one night, his voice breaking. The firm, the house, our savings. Everything. I stayed up all night, analyzing market patterns, historical recoveries, client portfolios. By morning, I had developed a comprehensive strategy, which sectors to move money from, which undervalued stocks to invest in, which clients needed personal calls to prevent panic selling. This is brilliant, William said, reviewing my work with bloodshot eyes. How did you see this when everyone else is running scared? Because I'm looking at numbers, not emotions, I replied. The market will recover. It always does. We just need to be positioned correctly when it happens. William implemented my strategy word for word. Within 6 months, while other firms were still reeling, Harrington Investments had not only stabilized but grown. Clients who had stayed received returns that outperformed the market by significant margin. New clients, impressed by our firm's resilience, were calling daily. The morning William made the announcement to his staff about the firm's remarkable recovery, I dressed carefully in a new blue suit, styled my hair, applied makeup with extra attention. For surely now, after such a triumph, William would acknowledge my contribution. Surely now, he would invite me to join the firm officially, to step out of the shadows and into the role I had essentially been performing for years. I waited by the phone all day. When William finally came home, he was beaming, carrying a bouquet of roses and a bottle of champagne. "They're calling it the Harrington Miracle," he announced, sweeping me into an embrace. "The board voted unanimously to expand. We're opening offices in 3 new cities by next year." "That's wonderful," I said, my smile not quite reaching my eyes. "And did you tell them about my contribution?" William's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Marty, you know how this works. The clients, the board, they've built relationships with me. It would confuse things to suddenly introduce you as the mastermind." "Mastermind," I repeated. "Is that what I am?" He kissed my forehead. "You're my secret weapon. My brilliant, beautiful secret weapon." He presented me with a diamond bracelet that night, a thank you for saving the firm. I wore it to bed, lying awake long after William had fallen asleep, watching the stones catch the moonlight filtering through our bedroom window. A beautiful cage. That's what my life had become. A comfortable, luxurious cage, built of choices I had made and compromises I had accepted. And the door, which had once been wide open, seemed to close a little more each year. But still, I told myself, we were partners in our own way. William needed me. The firm needed me, even if they didn't know it. And our family, now including our son Robert, growing into a young man who looked at his father with admiring eyes, they needed me too. So I continued, year after year, developing strategies, analyzing markets, building the business from behind the curtain, while William took the spotlight. I never asked for recognition again. I convinced myself it didn't matter, until the day I discovered exactly how much it did. It was 1998, and Harrington Investments was preparing to go public. The IPO would value the firm at over $200 million, a staggering sum that would make William not just wealthy, but truly rich. The kind of rich that changes how the world sees you, the kind of rich that turns a successful businessman into a financial titan. The preparations had been exhaustive. Prospectuses needed to be written, regulatory filings completed, investor meetings scheduled. William was working late every night, the pressure visible in the new lines around his eyes. One evening, unable to sleep, I drove to the office to bring him dinner. The security guard knew me and waved me through to the executive floor. William's office was dark, but I could see light from the conference room down the hall. I approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt if he was in a meeting. Through the partially open door, I could hear William's voice, confident and smooth as he addressed someone. The strategy was revolutionary, he was saying. While other firms were panicking during the crash of '87, I saw an opportunity to reposition our assets in undervalued sectors. It was risky, but my instincts were correct. My instincts, my strategy, my work. I peered through the gap in the door. William was speaking to a journalist, a recorder on the table between them. This was an interview for the financial press, part of the publicity push for the upcoming IPO. "And the innovative tax structure you pioneered," the journalist was saying. "That's become something of an industry standard now, hasn't it?" William smiled modestly. I noticed a pattern in the tax code that others had overlooked. It was simply a matter of connecting the dots. The tax structure I had developed during late nights at our kitchen table. The one William had initially questioned, until I walked him through it, step by step. "Your competitors must have been trying to poach you for years," the journalist commented. "What kept you loyal to your own vision?" "I've always believed in building something lasting," William replied. "Something I could be proud to pass on to my son someday." My son. Not our son. My son. In that moment, standing in the shadowed hallway of the firm I had helped build, but would never officially be part of, something inside me shifted. A realization, cold and clear as ice, crystallized in my mind. I had disappeared. Not physically, of course. I still existed as William's wife, as Robert's mother, as the woman who hosted dinner parties and sat on charity boards. But the other part of me, the financial mind, the strategist, the true partner in building Harrington Investments, that woman had been erased so completely that even William no longer acknowledged her existence. I had become a ghost in my own life. I didn't confront William that night. I placed the dinner I'd brought on his desk with a brief note and drove home in silence, tears blurring the streetlights into streaks of gold against the darkness. The next morning, for the first time in our marriage, I did something I'd never done before. I took the financial documents I'd been working on, a new market expansion strategy for after the IPO, and locked them in a safe deposit box at a bank. William didn't use. Then I went to see a lawyer. Not William's lawyer, not the firm's lawyer, but one I found myself, a sharp-eyed woman named Eleanor Jenkins, who specialized in intellectual property and partnership disputes. I need to protect myself, I told her. I need to ensure that my contributions aren't completely erased. Eleanor listened carefully as I explained my situation, my years of hidden work, my growing fear that I had allowed myself to become invisible. This won't be easy, she warned me. Without formal employment, without your name on documents, we're facing an uphill battle to prove your contributions. I understand, I replied. But I need to do something. For myself. That day marked the beginning of a careful, quiet campaign to document my work. I began keeping copies of everything I developed for the firm. I started recording dates, times, and details of my contributions in a journal locked in my desk drawer. I registered certain investment strategies under a pseudonym with the Copyright Office. I wasn't planning to sue William or damage the firm. I didn't want public recognition or even financial compensation. I simply needed to know that somewhere, in some official capacity, the truth existed, that Martha Harrington wasn't just a wife and mother, but a financial strategist whose work had built a $200 million. It was my insurance policy against complete erasure. A way to whisper to the future, I was here, I mattered, I built this too. And for the next 20 years, as Harrington Investments continued to grow, as William's reputation as a financial genius solidified, as our son Robert joined the firm and began learning the business he would someday inherit, I maintained my double life. Publicly, I was the supportive wife. Privately, I continued to develop strategies, analyze markets, identify opportunities, all documented, all preserved, all hidden away in case I ever needed to prove my existence. I never thought I would need those documents. I truly believed that William and I would grow old together, that our private partnership, however unequal, would sustain us until the end. I thought there would be time for truth, for recognition, for the world to know what we had built together. I was wrong. William's heart attack came without warning on a beautiful spring morning. One moment he was alive, vital, planning our anniversary trip to the coast. The next he was gone, leaving me alone with a truth no one else knew and a family who saw me as nothing more than an elderly widow who needed to be managed. If only they knew. If only they could see the fire that still burned inside me, the mind that had built the fortune they were so eager to claim. If only they understood that when they dismissed me, when they treated me like a burden, when they planned to exile me from my own home, they weren't just being cruel to an old woman. They were awakening a ghost. And ghosts, as they would soon discover, can be surprisingly powerful when they decide to make themselves known. The morning after I sent my family to a hotel, I awoke with a strange sense of both grief and purpose. The house was quiet, truly quiet, without the undercurrent of whispered plans and calculated moves that had filled it since William's funeral. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table gazing out at the garden, where the roses William and I had planted together were starting to bloom. He had loved those roses. Every year he would carefully prune them, fertilize them, protect them from frost and pests. Beauty requires attention, he would say. Neglect it, and it disappears. Like me, I thought bitterly. I had allowed myself to be neglected, to fade into the background of my own life. And now my family saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience to be managed before they could claim their inheritance. But that was about to change. I reached for the cordless phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. After 3 rings, a crisp professional voice answered. Jenkins, Legal Associates. Eleanor Jenkins, please, I said. Tell her it's Martha Harrington. There was a pause then. One moment, Mrs. Harrington. As I waited, I traced the wood grain of the kitchen table with my fingertip. This table had witnessed so much: family dinners, homework sessions, late-night financial strategizing. If furniture could talk, this table would tell the story of a woman who was so much more than what the world saw. Martha. Eleanor's voice came through the line, warm with recognition. It's been years. How are you? William is gone, I said simply, and I need your help. There was a moment of silence, then, I'm so sorry for your loss. When would you like to come in? Today, I replied, as soon as possible. 3 hours later, I sat in Eleanor's office, surrounded by the documents I had accumulated over decades, financial strategies with my handwritten notes in the margins, market analyses that had made millions for Harrington Investments, tax structures that had become industry standards, all created by me, all claimed by William. Eleanor, now in her 60s with elegant silver hair and the same sharp eyes I remembered, reviewed everything with methodical precision. You've been thorough, she said, looking up from a particularly complex investment strategy I had developed in 2005. Most people wouldn't have had the foresight to document everything so carefully. Most people haven't spent their lives being erased, I replied. She nodded, understanding in her gaze. And now you want to reclaim your contribution? I want my family to know the truth, I said. They think I'm just a burden now, an old woman to be shuffled off to Arizona while they divide William's fortune. They have no idea that half of what they're fighting over came from my mind. Eleanor steepled her fingers, studying me. The will reading is in 2 weeks, correct? What do you know about William's estate plans? Less than I should, I admitted. William handled the legal aspects. I trusted him. A small frown creased Eleanor's brow. That's not ideal, but we have options. She picked up one of the documents. A strategy I had developed during the 2008 financial crisis that had allowed Harrington Investments to not only survive, but thrive while other firms collapsed. This alone, she said, tapping the paper, constitutes intellectual property that would be worth millions in royalties if properly attributed, and you have dozens of similar examples. I don't want to damage the firm, I said quickly. Robert works there now. It's his future. Robert, Eleanor repeated, a hint of steel in her voice. The son who's planning to ship you off to Arizona and sell your home? I winced at the bluntness of her words, but couldn't deny their truth. We won't damage the firm, she assured me, but we will ensure that your contributions are recognized and properly compensated. And most importantly, she added with a small smile, we'll make sure your family understands exactly who they've been dismissing. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor and I developed a strategy of our own, one that would reveal the truth without destroying the company William and I had built together. By the time I left her office, clutching a folder of legal documents and a renewed sense of purpose, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: power. My family thought they knew who I was. They thought they understood what William had left behind. They were about to discover how wrong they had been. As I drove home, I rehearsed what I would say to Robert when he inevitably called to check in and try to continue the conversation about my future. I wouldn't reveal my hand yet. I would play the role they expected, the grieving widow, perhaps a bit difficult, but ultimately manageable. I would let them think they were in control, until the moment the truth was revealed. The phone was ringing when I walked through the front door. I set down my purse and the folder of legal documents on the hall table before answering. Hello? I said, keeping my voice neutral. Mom, it's Robert. My son's voice was strained, caught between irritation and forced patience. How are you feeling today? I'm managing, I replied simply. Good, good. He cleared his throat. Look, Mom. About yesterday. We all understand you're grieving. And maybe we moved too quickly with some of the changes. But we really do need to discuss practical arrangements. Practical arrangements. They're euphemism for disposing of me along with William's belongings. I'm not ready for that conversation yet, I said. The will reading is in 2 weeks. We can discuss everything after that. Mom, he began, but I cut him off. I need time, Robert. Surely you can understand that. He sighed heavily. Fine, but Patricia and I will come by tomorrow to check on you. And Mom? Please try to be reasonable. We all want what's best for you. What's best for me? Not what I want, not what I need, but what they had decided was best for me. As if at 73, I was no longer capable of determining that for myself. I'll see you tomorrow, I said, then hung up before he could say anything else. I walked through the house, touching familiar objects, remembering the life William and I had built here. The crystal vase he'd given me on our 25th anniversary, the painting from that gallery in Santa Fe, where we'd spent a rainy afternoon debating whether the artist's use of blue was melancholy or hopeful, the leather armchair where he'd sat every evening, reading the financial pages while I worked on my latest market analysis. They saw this house as just real estate, these possessions as just things to be divided and claimed. They didn't see the stories, the memories, the life woven into every corner. In the study, I unlocked William's desk drawer and removed a small key hidden beneath the felt lining. This key opened a safe in our bedroom closet. A safe Robert and Patricia didn't know existed. Inside were the most important documents, the ones I had kept separate from the files I'd shown Eleanor. Among them was a letter William had written 5 years ago, after his first heart scare. I'd never opened it. He had asked me not to, said it was for when the time comes. I wondered if that time was now. My fingers trembled slightly as I broke the seal on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of William's stationery, his bold handwriting covering both sides. My dearest Marty, it began, and immediately tears blurred my vision. No one had called me Marty in decades. It was a name from another life, from before I became just William's wife or Robert's mother. I wiped my eyes and continued reading. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I need to make a confession that's long overdue. I've lived with a lie that has eaten at me for years. The lie that Harrington Investments was solely my creation, my genius, my legacy. The truth, as you well know, is that without you, there would be no legacy. You were never just my wife. You were my partner, my strategist, my secret weapon, the financial mind that saved us in '87, that navigated us through the dot-com bubble, that pioneered the tax structures that became our competitive advantage. That mind was yours, not mine. I told myself that I was protecting you by keeping your contributions private. I convinced myself that the business world wasn't ready for a woman with your capabilities. But the truth, the shameful truth I've never admitted until now, is that I was protecting myself. My ego, my image, my reputation as the financial wizard everyone believed me to be. I stole your light, Marty. I diminished you to elevate myself. And for that, I can never fully atone. But I've tried to make amends in the only way I know how. My will contains provisions that will surprise our family, provisions that acknowledge your rightful place as co-creator of everything we've built. The instructions to my lawyer are clear. The truth of your contributions must be revealed, and your rightful share of our fortune secured. Robert won't understand at first. He's grown up seeing me as the sole architect of our success. But he needs to know the truth, not just about the business, but about what a truly exceptional woman his mother is. I hope someday you can forgive me for all the years I let you stand in my shadow. You deserved so much more than to be the woman behind the man. With love and endless regret, Will. The letter slipped from my fingers as sobs overtook me. Not just grief for William, but for all the years I had silenced myself, all the recognition I had surrendered, all the times I had chosen his success over my own identity. But beneath the grief was something else. Validation. William had known. He had seen. And in his final act he had chosen truth over reputation, Justice over convenience. I carefully folded the letter and returned it to the safe, along with the other documents. Then I straightened my shoulders and walked to the kitchen to make a cup of tea. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden. The roses William had planted were opening their blooms, defiant in their beauty. Tomorrow, Robert and Patricia would come with their plans and their practicalities. They would try again to manage me, to diminish me, to erase me from my own life. But they didn't know what I now knew. They couldn't see the fire that had been rekindled inside me. For decades I had been a ghost in my own life. Now it was time for the ghost to speak. And when I did, when the truth was finally revealed, my family would never look at me the same way again. They thought they knew Martha Harrington, the elderly widow who needed to be managed. They were about to meet Marty, the woman who had built an empire from behind the curtain, and was finally ready to step into the light. Robert and Patricia arrived promptly at 10 the next morning, their expressions a mixture of concern and determination. They found me in the garden, pruning William's roses with careful precision. "Mom," Robert called, approaching with forced cheer. "You shouldn't be out in this heat. Let me help you inside." I straightened, removing my gardening gloves. "I've been tending these roses for 30 years, Robert. I think I know my limits." Patricia stepped forward, designer sunglasses perched on her head. "Martha, we brought some brochures from that retirement community we mentioned, the Oasis at Saguaro Hills. It's really lovely. Pool, golf course, activities every day." "How thoughtful," I replied, keeping my tone neutral as I led them into the house. In the kitchen, I prepared coffee while they spread the glossy brochures across the table. Pictures of smiling seniors playing cards, swimming, painting watercolors, all against the backdrop of desert landscapes. "They have a waiting list," Patricia said, but Robert pulled some strings. "We could have you moved in by the end of next month." "Moved in," I repeated. "And what about my home, my possessions?" Robert cleared his throat. "We'd help you choose what to take, of course. The apartments are spacious but obviously smaller than this house. The rest we could sell or distribute among the family." "I see." I placed the coffee cups on the table with deliberate care. "And have you considered that I might not want to move to Arizona?" Patricia laughed lightly, as if I'd said something amusing. "Martha, be practical. This house is far too large for you to manage alone. The property taxes alone." "I'm aware of the property taxes," I interrupted. "I've been handling the household finances for 50 years. Robert shot Patricia a warning glance before turning to me with his most reasonable expression. "Mom, we know this is hard. Change always is. But Dad would want you to be taken care of, to be safe. And you believe shipping me off to Arizona is what William would want?" I asked quietly. "It's not shipping you off," Robert protested. "It's finding you an appropriate living situation." I sipped my coffee, studying my son over the rim of the cup. He looked so much like William, the same strong jaw, the same confident posture. But he lacked William's perceptiveness, his ability to see beneath the surface. Robert had always taken things at face value, accepting the world as it presented itself to him without questioning deeper realities. He had grown up watching William take credit for my work, seeing me as just a supportive wife rather than a true partner in building the family fortune. Was it any wonder he now saw me as dispensable? "The will reading is in 12 days, I said finally. "Until then, I'd prefer to stay in my home and grieve in peace." Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but Robert placed a hand on her arm. "All right, Mom. We can wait until after the reading. But we'll need to make decisions quickly after that. The retirement community won't hold the spot indefinitely." I nodded, not committing to anything. "How is Emma? And Michael?" I asked, changing the subject to my grandchildren. "They're fine," Patricia replied. "Emma's applying to colleges next year. She's thinking pre-law. And Michael made the varsity baseball team." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased, despite everything. "I'd love to see them before they go back to Boston." Robert shifted uncomfortably. They're pretty busy with summer activities. But we'll try to arrange something. Too busy to visit their newly widowed grandmother. Or perhaps Robert and Patricia didn't want them to see me, afraid I might say something about their plans to exile me. We made stilted conversation for another 20 minutes. Robert asked if I needed anything from the store. Patricia commented on how I was holding up well. Neither of them mentioned the sticky notes they had placed throughout the house, the renovation plans they had made, or the way they had discussed my possessions as if I were already gone. As they prepared to leave, Robert embraced me. Awkwardly. "We'll check in again tomorrow," he said. "And Mom, please think about what we discussed. The oasis really is a lovely place." I walked them to the door, waving as they backed out of the driveway. As soon as their car disappeared around the corner, I returned to the kitchen and picked up the brochures they had left behind. The oasis at Saguaro Hills, where golden years glisten. I dropped them into the recycling bin. Then I picked up the phone and called Eleanor Jenkins. "I need a meeting with William's lawyer," I told her. "Before the will reading." "I'll arrange it," Eleanor promised. "And Martha? Bring all the documentation, every piece of evidence we have." "I will," I assured her. It's time everyone learned the truth. After hanging up, I walked to William's study and unlocked the hidden safe once more. Inside, nestled among the important documents, was a small velvet box I hadn't opened in years. It contained my first business card from Hammond & Associates, Marty Wilson, financial analyst, a relic from another life, from before I became Martha Harrington, before I allowed myself to disappear. I slipped the card into my pocket, a talisman from the woman I used to be, the woman I was about to become again. The days before the will reading passed in a blur of preparation. Eleanor and I met with Mr. Adler, William's longtime attorney, in his wood-paneled office downtown. I presented my evidence, decades of financial strategies, market analyses, tax structures, all created by me, but claimed by William. I showed him the letter William had written, confessing the truth and promising to make amends. Mr. Adler, a serious man with wire-rimmed glasses and impeccable manners, listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "William spoke to me about this," he said finally. "About 6 months ago, he came to revise his will. He wanted to ensure that your contributions would be recognized and properly compensated." My heart leapt. "So you knew?" "Not the extent of it," Mr. Adler admitted. "William described you as his silent partner. But seeing these documents," he gestured to the stack of evidence before him, "your role was clearly more substantial than even he acknowledged." "And the revised will?" Eleanor asked. "Does it reflect Mrs. Harrington's true contribution?" Mr. Adler adjusted his glasses. "I cannot discuss the specifics before the formal reading, but I can tell you that William was determined to set things right." As we left his office, Eleanor squeezed my arm encouragingly. "This is good, Martha. Very good." I wasn't so sure. William might have tried to make amends, but would it be enough? Would Robert and the others truly understand what had been hidden from them all these years? Or would they see it as the confused decision of an old man, easily dismissed or challenged? I spent the night before the will reading sorting through old photographs. William and me, on our wedding day, young and full of promise. Robert, as a baby, cradled in my arms. Family vacations, holidays, celebrations. So many memories, so many moments when I had been present, but somehow invisible. My true self hidden beneath the surface of William's wife. Tomorrow, I thought, gazing at a photo of William and me at the company's 30th anniversary gala. Tomorrow, the truth comes out. I slept fitfully, dreaming of numbers and strategies, and the faces of my family twisted in shock. When morning came, I dressed with particular care. A tailored navy suit I rarely wore. Pearl earrings William had given me on our 40th anniversary. My hair neatly styled. I wanted to look strong, capable, professional. Not like a grandmother who could be easily dismissed, but like the financial mind who had built an empire from the shadows. Robert and Patricia picked me up at 9. They seemed tense, exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Emma and Michael were already at the attorney's office, they explained, along with William's sister Margaret and her husband. The whole family gathered for the revelation of William's final wishes. The drive to Mr. Adler's office was silent, heavy with unspoken expectations. Robert kept checking his watch, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel. Patricia scrolled through her phone, deliberately avoiding conversation. Nervous? I asked Robert as we pulled into the parking lot. He glanced at me, surprised. No, why would I be? Just anxious to get the formalities over with. Formalities. As if his father's last wishes were just an inconvenient bureaucratic process. Mr. Adler's conference room was already full when we arrived. Emma and Michael sat together, both dressed in somber dark clothes that seemed at odds with the excitement in their eyes. Margaret and her husband David nodded politely as we entered. Eleanor Jenkins sat slightly apart from the family, her presence raising eyebrows. Who's she? I heard Robert whisper to Patricia. Mom's lawyer, I think, Patricia whispered back, her tone concerned. Mr. Adler called the meeting to order, his manner formal and precise. We are gathered today for the reading of the last will and testament of William James Harrington, he began. Before I proceed, I must note that Mr. Harrington made significant revisions to his will, approximately 6 months ago. These revisions have been properly notarized and are legally binding. Robert shifted in his seat. Revisions? Dad never mentioned any revisions. Nevertheless, Mr. Adler continued, they exist and are valid. Now, shall we proceed? He opened a thick folder and began to read. The standard legal language washed over us. I, William James Harrington, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. Then came the first surprise. To my son, Robert William Harrington, I leave my collection of rare books, my personal effects, and the sum of $5 million. $5 million. Not the substantial inheritance Robert had clearly been expecting. His face flushed, but he remained silent as Mr. Adler continued. However, I must add a condition. Mr. Adler looked up, his expression grave. In the event that Robert has spoken ill of his mother, Martha Wilson Harrington, following my death, $1 million shall be deducted from his inheritance for each documented instance of disrespect. The room fell silent. Robert's face paled. What does that mean? He asked, his voice strained. What constitutes speaking ill? Mr. Adler reached into his folder and removed a sealed envelope. Mr. Harrington anticipated this question. He left this recording to be played at the reading. He placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. William's voice, slightly weakened by illness but still strong in conviction, filled the room. Robert, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and you've questioned the condition I've placed on your inheritance. Let me be clear. I've watched for years as you gradually adopted a dismissive attitude toward your mother. You've interrupted her, ignored her opinions, treated her as if her only value was in supporting me and raising you. This stops now. Robert's face grew even paler. I've instructed Mr. Adler to install monitoring equipment in the family home following my death. With Martha's consent, of course, every instance of disrespect, every dismissive comment, every plan made without her input regarding her future, all of it has been recorded and will be counted against your inheritance. I glanced at Robert, watching the realization dawn on his face. The casual cruelty, the dismissive comments, the plans to ship me off to Arizona, all of it documented, all of it counting against him. Your mother, William's voice continued, deserves your respect, not just because she raised you, but because she is far more than you have ever given her credit for. Which brings me to the most important part of my will. Mr. Adler stopped the recording and turned to a new page. To my wife, Martha Wilson Harrington, I leave our family home, all associated properties, and the remainder of my financial assets. Additionally, I hereby acknowledge that Martha Wilson Harrington has been the uncredited co-creator of Harrington Investments, most successful financial strategies, tax structures, and investment models since the company's inception. Gasps echoed around the table. Robert's head snapped up, his expression incredulous. Furthermore, Mr. Adler continued, I direct the board of Harrington Investments to recognize Martha Wilson Harrington as the rightful author of the following intellectual properties, with all associated royalties and rights retroactively assigned to her. What followed was a list of every major strategy I had developed over the decades: the crash recovery plan from 1987, the tax structure that had become an industry standard, the IPO model that had taken the company public. All of it finally in my name. This is ridiculous, Robert burst out. Mom was a housewife, not a financial strategist. Dad must have been confused when he made these changes. Mr. Adler looked at him over his glasses. Your father was of perfectly sound mind, Mr. Harrington. In fact, he provided extensive documentation to support these claims. He gestured to Eleanor, who opened her briefcase and began distributing copies of the evidence William and I had compiled. Additionally, Mr. Adler continued, Mrs. Harrington has provided further proof of her contributions, including original drafts of these strategies in her handwriting, dated correspondence, and witness statements from former colleagues at Hammond and Associates, where she worked before her marriage. The room fell silent as my family leafed through the evidence of my hidden career, my invisible contributions, my erased expertise. This can't be real, Patricia murmured, looking up from a strategy document covered in my distinctive handwriting. Martha never said anything about this. Would you have believed me if I had? I asked quietly. Emma, my granddaughter, was staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Grandma, she said slowly, you created all these investment models? The ones Dad's always talking about? I did, I confirmed. For over 40 years. But why didn't you ever say anything? Michael asked, genuine confusion in his young face. Why let Grandpa take all the credit? It was a fair question, one I had asked myself countless times over the decades. It was a different time, I explained. When your grandfather and I started the company, clients wouldn't have trusted their money to a woman, so I worked behind the scenes. It became our arrangement, and then it became our life. And Dad knew? Robert asked, his voice hollow. All this time, he knew, I said softly. Not at first, perhaps not the full extent, but yes, he knew. And in the end, he wanted to make it right. Mr. Adler cleared his throat. There is one final item. Mr. Harrington left a personal letter for each of you. He asked that you read them privately after the will reading. He distributed sealed envelopes to Robert, Emma, Michael, and finally, to me. Mine was thicker than the others, the envelope heavy with what I assumed were William's final words to me. This concludes the formal reading of the will, Mr. Adler announced. Are there any questions? The room remained silent, everyone still processing the revelations that had unfolded. Robert stared at the table, his face a mask of confusion and disbelief. Patricia kept glancing between me and the documents before her, as if trying to reconcile the woman she thought she knew with the evidence of my true capabilities. Then we are adjourned, Mr. Adler said. Mrs. Harrington, if you'll stay behind, there are some papers requiring your signature. As the others filed out in stunned silence, Eleanor squeezed my hand beneath the table. Well done, she whispered. 50 years late, but well done. I watched my family leave, wondering what would happen next. Would Robert accept the truth or fight it? Would my grandchildren see me differently now? Had I destroyed relationships in my quest for recognition, or created the possibility for new ones based on truth rather than illusion? I didn't know, but for the first time in decades, I felt fully visible, fully present, fully myself. The ghost had spoken, and now, whatever came next, at least it would be real. The aftermath of the will reading unfolded in ways I couldn't have predicted. Robert avoided me for 3 days, not answering my calls, not responding to my messages. Patricia sent a brief text saying they were processing and needed space. Emma, surprisingly, came to visit alone the day after the reading, full of questions about my work, my education, my choices. I'm majoring in economics next year, she told me, sitting at the kitchen table where I had created so many of the strategies that had built our family fortune. I never knew I got it from you. Neither did I admitted, pouring her a cup of tea. You've always been so much like your father. She shook her head, a new awareness in her eyes. I think maybe I'm like you, Grandma. I just never knew it before. Michael sent a text message with a single question. Did you really save the company during the crash of '87? When I replied with the details of the strategy I'd developed, working through the night while William slept, he responded with a single word, badass. It made me smile, this glimpse of a relationship with my grandchildren that might have been possible all along if only the truth had been known. On the fourth day after the reading, Robert finally came to see me. He arrived unannounced, looking tired and drawn, his usual confidence diminished. I invited him in, led him to the living room where so many family discussions had taken place over the years. I've been talking to people at the firm, he said without preamble. Old-timers who worked with Dad from the beginning. They confirmed everything. Said they always suspected you were more involved than Dad let on, but never knew the extent of it. I waited, letting him work through his thoughts. Why didn't you tell me? He asked finally, hurt evident in his voice. All these years, why keep it secret from your own son? It was a fair question, one I had anticipated but still found difficult to answer. At first, it wasn't my decision, I explained. It was your father's choice to present himself as the sole creator of the firm's success. By the time you were old enough to understand, the pattern was set, and then, I hesitated. Then you joined the firm, idolizing your father, seeing him as this financial genius. How could I take that from you? So you let me believe a lie? Anger tinged his words. Let me build my career on strategies I thought were his, but were actually yours? I let you build your career on excellent strategies, I corrected gently. Does it really matter who created them? Of course it matters. He stood up, pacing the room. It matters because I've been dismissing my own mother, treating you like you couldn't possibly understand the business when all along you were its secret architect. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? Probably about as bad as being dismissed and erased for 50 years, I replied quietly. He stopped pacing, staring at me as if truly seeing me for the first time. Mom, he struggled for words. I don't know how to process this. Neither did I, for a very long time, I said. But here we are. The truth is out now. The question is, what do we do with it? Robert sank back onto the sofa, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my heart ache. The board wants to meet with you, he said after a moment. They've reviewed the documentation. They want to discuss formally recognizing your contributions, maybe even naming you as co-founder emeritus. I hadn't expected that. And how do you feel about it? He was silent for a long moment, conflict evident on his face. Then he sighed deeply. Honestly, I'm still processing everything. But you deserve recognition. You've earned it. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was acknowledgement, something I had lived without for far too long. There's something else, Robert continued, about your inheritance. Dad left you everything. The house, the investments, the intellectual property rights. It's substantial. I know, I said simply. Patricia and I, we had plans. For the house, for the money, for our future. He looked uncomfortable. We were counting on a certain inheritance. You mean the inheritance you plan to use while shipping me off to Arizona? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. He had the grace to look ashamed. We thought we were doing what was best for you, without ever asking what I wanted, I pointed out, without ever considering that I might have my own plans, my own desires for my future. I'm sorry, he said, and I believed he meant it. I underestimated you. We all did. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of decades of misunderstanding between us, What happens now? Robert finally asked. With the house? With the money? With us? It was the question I had been asking myself since the will reading. What did I want? After 50 years of living for others, of sublimating my desires, my ambitions, my very identity, what did Martha Harrington, nee Marty Wilson, truly want? I'm keeping the house, I said decisively. At least for now. It's my home, filled with memories I'm not ready to leave behind. Robert nodded, accepting this without argument. As for the money, I continued, I have some ideas about that. A foundation, perhaps, to support women in finance. Scholarships for young women like I once was, with the minds for business but facing barriers to entry. The Martha Harrington Foundation, Robert mused. It has a nice ring to it. The Marty Wilson Foundation, I corrected him. I think it's time I reclaimed that part of myself too. He smiled slightly, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him since the will reading. I like it. And as for us, I said, meeting his gaze directly, that depends on you, Robert. I'm your mother. I've always loved you, even when you couldn't see me clearly. But going forward, I need respect, not just as your mother, but as a person with value, with capabilities, with a mind of my own. I can do that, he said quietly. It might take some adjustment, but I can do that. It wasn't everything, but it was a beginning, a foundation for a new relationship built on truth rather than illusion. As Robert prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Dad's letter? He said. Have you read yours yet? I shook my head. The envelope William had left me remained unopened on my bedside table. I wasn't quite ready for his final words, his final explanation. I read mine, Robert told me. He said he hoped I would learn to see you as he finally had, not just as a wife and mother, but as an equal partner, a brilliant mind, a woman who sacrificed her recognition so that he and I could shine. He swallowed hard. He asked me to make sure you finally received the respect you deserved. And will you? I asked softly. I'll try, he promised. Every day, I'll try. After he left, I sat in the garden among William's roses, thinking about the future that now stretched before me. A future where I was visible, acknowledged, free to be Marty again, after all these years. The next morning, I finally opened William's letter. It was long, detailed, full of apologies and explanations and wishes for my future. But one passage stood out, bringing tears to my eyes. Marty, my brilliant, beautiful Marty, I hope you will forgive me for all the years I kept you in the shadows. I hope you will take what is rightfully yours and build something new, something that is fully and completely your own. And I hope you will remember that despite my failings, despite the ways I diminished you, I always saw your light, even when I was selfish enough to stand in front of it. Live now, Marty. Live boldly. Live visibly. Live as the extraordinary woman you have always been. And so I would. Not for William, not for Robert, not for anyone but myself. The time for living in shadows was over. The ghost had found her voice, and she had no intention of ever being silent again. 3 months after the will reading, I stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Harrington Investments headquarters, looking out at a sea of faces, board members, employees, financial reporters, and my family, sitting in the front row. Robert, still adjusting to the new reality, but making an effort. Patricia, her initial resistance softening into grudging respect. Emma and Michael, proud of their grandmother in a way they never expected to be. For 50 years I began, my voice steady and clear. I worked behind the scenes, creating the strategies and models that helped build this company into what it is today. I did so without recognition, without credit, without my name on a single document or plaque, or annual report. The room was silent, every eye fixed on me. That changes today, I continued. Not just for me, but for every woman who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, or erased from the story of her own achievements. Today, we correct the record. I gestured to the veiled plaque on the wall behind me. As the cover was removed, revealing the new company name, Harrington and Wilson Investments, applause erupted throughout the room. "This is not just about adding my name to a building," I explained as the applause died down. "It's about acknowledging that success has many architects, that behind every self-made success story are often hidden contributors whose work deserves to be recognized." As I continued my speech announcing the creation of the Marty Wilson Foundation for Women in Finance, I caught Robert's eye in the front row. He nodded slightly, a gesture of respect that meant more to me than all the applause in the world. Later that evening, as we gathered for a family dinner in the home that was now officially, legally, undeniably mine, I looked around the table and felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in decades. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, and might never be, but because finally, at long last, I was living as my true self. I was Martha Marty Wilson Harrington, widow, mother, grandmother, financial strategist, philanthropist, woman, no longer invisible, no longer erased, no longer a ghost in my own life. I raised my glass, meeting each pair of eyes around the table. "To truth," I said simply. "May we all have the courage to speak it, and to hear it when it's spoken." As they echoed my toast, I felt William's presence, not as a shadow that had eclipsed me for so many years, but as the man who had finally, in his last act, helped me reclaim my light. And in that moment, surrounded by a family who was learning to see me clearly for the first time, I knew that the most important legacy wasn't the money or the company or even the recognition. It was the truth. The simple, powerful truth that I had always been more than they knew. That behind the quiet grandmother, the supportive wife, the background figure they had so easily dismissed, there had always been a woman of substance, of brilliance, of worth. A woman who had finally, after 50 years, stepped out of the shadows and into the light that had been waiting for her all along.